Hello and welcome to this Sophos certified training course for Sophos XG Firewall. This is Module 6, Web Protection and Application Control. Web protection and application control on the XG Firewall protects users from web-based malware and other threats such as social engineering, as well as restricting access to unproductive websites. In this module, you will learn to configure custom activities and use this to create web policies that have different rules based on a user's identity. We will also cover creating and applying application filters and how to categorize applications using synchronized app control. Sophos provides a number of predefined web policies, from simple allow all and deny all to more complex policies such as the default workplace policy. These policies exist to allow administrators a simple way to provide a secure web browsing experience to their users without having to spend time creating and researching similar policies. However, if none of the predefined policies fit the need of the organization, then a custom policy can be created either from scratch or by cloning an existing policy as a starting point. Each web policy is made up of an ordered list of rules that apply to a set of users, have one or more activities, an action, and optionally can be scheduled to only be active at certain times. After clicking on the Add Policy or Clone Policy button, a new window will appear allowing you to begin the creation of the new policy. A name for the new policy is required and a description is optional. Each web policy contains an ordered list of policy rules and a default action that will be used if none of the policy rules are matched. There are also a number of advanced settings that we will look at later in this module. Each web policy rule applies to either specific users and groups or everyone. You define the activities or types of web traffic that is going to be controlled. You can optionally also apply a keyword content filter to the traffic. Select an action for the rule, such as allow, warn, or block, and any time constraints. If no time constraints are selected, then the rule will be active all of the time. Finally, you can enable and disable individual rules. The HTTPS use action allows an administrator to define a different action in a web policy specifically for HTTPS traffic. For example, for security reasons, a company may not allow HTTP connections to financial services, such as online banking. As can be seen here, there is a block action for anybody attempting to access a financial services page. An administrator can then set the HTTPS use action to allow HTTPS or even warn HTTPS, which would allow the same user to connect to the financial site as long as they are using HTTPS to connect. This will be indicated by the color-coded lock that appears after the action in the rule: green for allow, yellow for warn, and red for block HTTPS connections. In the Advanced Settings section of a web policy, there are various options that allow us to further control web access and logging for our users. First, we have the option to log and report upon any traffic that is processed by this policy. If this option is disabled, then no information will be recorded when this policy processes traffic. Next, we have the option to limit how large a file can be downloaded through the XG firewall. By checking the box and entering a maximum download size, administrators can control the maximum size for files that can be downloaded by anyone the policy applies to. For companies that use Google Apps, the XG firewall can automatically restrict users from logging into unapproved Google domains by entering only the domains that the organizations consider appropriate. And finally, an administrator can enable the YouTube for Schools feature and enter a YouTube School ID. After doing so, restrictions can be configured through the YouTube control panel, and the XG will pass the ID along with any requests that users make to YouTube. Once you are satisfied with the policy that you have created and its options, it will need to be applied to the users. In order to do this, we will edit a firewall user or network rule. In the Advanced section, click on the Web Policy dropdown and select the policy that you would like to apply to the rule. Make sure and save the rule when you are done modifying it. The XG firewall allows the creation of user activities as a way to group together categories, file types, and URL groups into a single, easily managed group for use in web policies. When navigating to Protect Web User Activities, you will find that a number of pre-configured user activity groupings already exist. These commonly used pre-created groups are ready to be applied into web policies, or can be cloned or edited in order to meet the needs of the organization's web policies. The administrator also has the option of creating new user activities by clicking the Add button and filling out the pop-up box that appears with a name and any categories, file types, and URL groups that match what traffic the company is wanting to control. The XG firewall has over 90 predefined categories built into the device. These have been classified by Sophos Labs. However, if the needs of the organization do not line up with this, they can be modified. This is easily done by either clicking on the underlined name of the category or the icon of a pencil to the right. This will take you to the definition, where you can modify the classification setting or add a traffic shaping policy. Instead of manually creating a category, you can choose to import a URL database either from an HTTP or FTP site. While creating the URL category, select the option for External URL Database, and then enter either an HTTP or FTP address of a server that contains the URL database. The database should be in a tar, gz, bz, bz2, or text file format in order to be supported by the XG firewall, and will be checked every 2 hours for updated information. The URL Groups feature allows an administrator to create a group of a specific set of URLs that are manually entered into the XG that can then be used inside of web policies or user activities. URL groups are useful if there is a very specific and limited set of domains and their included subdomains that the company would like to control access to. In order to create a URL group, navigate to Protect Web URL groups and then click the Add button in the upper right of the screen. On the Add URL Group page, first assign the new group a name and optionally a description so that you and others can identify the new group when adding it to a policy. In the Domain Names to Match section, type in any domains that you would like the group to match. Note that when a domain is entered, if any subdomains exist for the entered domain, they will also be identified by the URL group. The Sophos XG firewall comes with a pre-configured list of file types that is not editable. These definitions are updated by Sophos Labs as part of the XG firewall update process and contain file extensions, MIME types, and clear descriptions of the different groups. While you cannot customize the pre-created groups, you can use the Add button to create your own group. When creating a custom group, enter a name and description for your new file type group so that it can be identified when using it in a policy. Administrators have the option of selecting a template that will populate the extension and MIME fields with the most common entries for the template type. File extensions can then be added to the template or typed into the blank field, separated by commas. Do not include periods in the file extensions. MIME headers will help identify file types in case the extensions have been modified to try and bypass the filters. MIME types can be found by doing simple web searches on the Internet. Web policies include the option to log, monitor, and enforce policy related to keyword lists. This feature is particularly important in education environments to ensure online child safety and provide insights into students using keywords related to self-harm, bullying, radicalization, and otherwise inappropriate content. Keyword libraries can be uploaded to the firewall and applied to any web filtering policy as an added criteria with actions to log and monitor or block search results or websites containing the keywords of interest. Comprehensive reporting is provided to identify keyword matches and users that are searching or consuming keyword content of interest, enabling proactive intervention before an at-risk user becomes a real problem. Keyword lists are plain text files with one term per line. Let's look at how all of this works with a simulation. This simulation will show configuration of keyword filtering on XG Firewall. Review the information at each stage and then click in the orange box to advance to the next slide. The exceptions found within the web protection in the Sophos XG firewall can be used to bypass certain security checks or actions for any sites that match criteria specified in the exception. There are a few predefined exceptions already in the XG firewall, and more can be created at the administrator's discretion. It is important to note that exceptions apply to all web protection policies, no matter where they are applied in the XG firewall. To create or edit an existing exception, begin by clicking either the Add Exception button or the Clone or Edit buttons. Next, categories can be selected if desired. Any sites that match a category will be caught by the exception. Source IP addresses can be entered. This will allow the exception to only apply to certain clients within the network and not the general populace. And finally, destination IP addresses can be listed in order to make sure that the site to which the exception applies matches the known IP addresses. Make note that some websites have multiple IP addresses for redundancy, and all of them will need to be listed here. It is also very important to note that if multiple traffic criteria is listed, then an AND operator will be in effect between the different types of criteria. However, within each category, an OR operator is used to evaluate each group. This means that if multiple types of criteria are selected, such as category and URL, then both must match in order for the exception to take place. Under the Protection tab, we find options to adjust malware scanning, search engine content filtering, as well as some options for SSL decryption and scanning. Within the Malware Scanning section, we can select to use a single scan engine for performance or dual engines for maximum protection. Note that with dual engines selected, users may experience a delay in the loading of pages. Sandstorm protection requires the Sophos scan engine. This means that you need to either select Sophos as the primary scan engine or use dual engine scanning. The malware scan mode can be set to real-time for speedier processing or batch for a more cautious approach. Then, we must decide on how to handle content that cannot be scanned due to factors such as being encrypted or password protected. The safest option is to block this content, but it can be allowed if required. An option is available as part of web protection to block potentially unwanted applications from being downloaded. Specific applications can be allowed by adding them to the authorized PUA's list, and is applied as part of the malware protection in firewall rules. The Search Engine Enforcement option allows us to enforce Safe Search for any search engines that currently support it, which at the time of writing are Google, Bing, and Yahoo. This filters searched content as per each search engine's Safe Search policy. This can further be extended by implementing filters for images with a Creative Commons license. In the final section of the protection page, we can set what certificate will be used for HTTPS decryption and scanning, as well as if the administrator would like to block any traffic that attempts to bypass the HTTPS scanning. Also, if the page being requested is an HTTPS page and does not have a valid certificate, the XG firewall can block access to it. The global Sandstorm configuration is located in Protect Advanced Threat Sandstorm Settings. Here, you can specify whether a Europe or US Sandstorm data center will be used, or let Sandstorm decide where to send files for analysis based on which will give the best performance. You may need to configure this to remain compliant with data protection laws. You can also choose to exclude certain types of files from Sandstorm using the predefined options. In the Advanced section of the Web Settings, there are options to cache various types of information. The first is to cache web content that is browsed by users. This allows the XG Firewall to reduce bandwidth consumption by keeping a copy of frequently visited sites and delivering those stored sites directly to users from the XG Firewall without having to retrieve them again from the Internet. In some situations, users will also notice an increase in performance as well. The second caching option is for Sophos endpoint updates. This will cache Sophos endpoint updates on the XG Firewall and will improve performance on the network if Sophos endpoint is deployed behind the XG Firewall on multiple clients. Without this option, network congestion may occur when many endpoints attempt to update at the same time. For example, if they are using Sophos Central for endpoint protection. There are also options for web proxy configuration. The XG Firewall will by default intercept web traffic transparently to enforce web protection. However, by configuring a listening port and allowed destination ports, the XG Firewall can be used as a direct web proxy, where clients have to configure their browsers to point to the XG Firewall for access to the Internet. To enable Sandstorm for web protection, it must be enabled in the Malware Scanning Settings section of the Firewall rule. The option will be grayed out unless HTTP or HTTPS scanning is selected. When a user accesses a website over HTTPS, they usually create a secure tunnel between their computer all the way to the web server where the website is being hosted. With Decrypt and Scan, the secure tunnel is only created to the Sophos XG Firewall. To be able to scan HTTPS traffic, the XG Firewall decrypts and scans the content, then encrypts it and sends it on to the user. So that the user's browser sees an SSL certificate with the correct website name, the XG Firewall has to generate one for each HTTPS domain that is accessed and sign it with its own certificate authority. So that users do not see a certificate error in their browser, they need to have the CA certificate installed so that they trust the certificates generated by the XG Firewall. This is also known as man-in-the-middle. Let's look at an example. A user requests the website https://www.sophos.com. The Sophos XG Firewall intercepts this request and makes its own request to https://www.sophos.com. The secure tunnel between the web server and the Sophos XG Firewall uses the SSL certificate from the website www.sophos.com. The secure tunnel between the user and the Sophos XG Firewall uses an SSL certificate that the Sophos XG Firewall has created and signed itself using the same common name as the website, www.sophos.com. The user's browser will see that the SSL certificate matches the name of the website that was requested. The result of this is that while the traffic is passing through the Sophos XG firewall between the two secure tunnels, it is not encrypted, and the Sophos XG firewall can filter it like normal HTTP traffic. Surfing quotas can be configured on the XG firewall to limit the amount of time that users or groups can spend browsing the internet. The following quotas ship with the XG firewall and can be applied or modified to control browsing time by users. A custom policy can also be created by clicking on the Add button in the upper right of the quotas screen. When defining a surfing quota, we start by entering a name for the quota, and a description is recommended to assist with identifying the purpose of the quota. If the quota will be recurring, then select a cyclic quota and fill out the cycle hours. This allows us to define how many hours and minutes of surfing time are allowed per period, where the period can be a number of days, weeks, months, or years. For example, here we can see that 4 hours of surfing will be allowed per week. If this will not be a repeating entry, such as a guest quota, the cycle type can be set to non-cyclic, and a validity can be entered to define how much time a user has to use up their available hours. And then, the hours and minutes that they have to surf the internet can be entered. Selecting Unlimited for validity means that there is no expiration of their available time, and the Unlimited option for maximum hours means that there is no limit to how much a user can browse within the validity period. The final web protection piece we are going to cover in this module is traffic shaping. Sophos XG Firewall allows administrators to define traffic shaping policies which apply to web filter categories. From Protect Web Categories. The policy can either be to limit the amount of bandwidth that a web category consumes, for example for video streaming, or to guarantee bandwidth to business-critical applications. In the traffic shaping policy, you can configure whether the upload and download will be independently shaped, the priority of the traffic, the bandwidth limits, and whether the limits apply to each connection or are shared for all connections. There exist many applications on the internet that can be used for various purposes, from CRM and email to watching movies and chatting. There are an ever-growing number of applications popping up for users to take advantage of. Many of them are useful work tools, while others, while not necessarily harmful, are unproductive time wasters. If a company wants to ensure that its users are not spending valuable work time on apps such as games or social networking, application protection can be configured to limit what a user is able to run from the internet. We will now take a look at a sample configuration in XG Firewall. Application control can be found under Protect Applications, and within the Application List subheading, we can see a predefined list of applications that exist on the Sophos XG Firewall. This list is maintained by Sophos Labs and updated as part of the regular firewall updates that the XG Firewall receives. In the upper right-hand corner, we can see the total number of applications that the XG Firewall can currently identify. These applications can then be put to use in an application filter. In the application filter subheading, we can see that there exists a number of predefined application filters already. There will always exist an allow all and deny all set of filters. However, we have also included a number of useful filters to perform such actions as block high-risk apps or P2P networking applications. These filters can be edited or new ones can be created. In order to create a new filter, click the Add button in the top right corner of the screen. When creating a new application filter, first we need to give the filter a name and description to identify it. Next, select an existing template as a starting point for your new filter. If you would like to start with a blank template, select the Allow All template, as that will have no applications in the list. Now, click Save. This will take you back to the application filter list. From the application filter list, either click on the name of your new application filter or click the pencil to the right of it to begin configuring your new filter. It will look similar to the Create New Application filter, except that instead of selecting a template, we now see any rules that were imported as well as a button to add applications to this filter. To begin adding applications, click the Add button. In the Add Application Filter Policy Rules box, we need to select filter options in order to show only the applications that we would like to control. To do this, select the filter criteria, which can be a combination of the following: category of application, risk level of an application based on numerous factors such as how many exploits exist that target the application, characteristics of the application, such as if the application uses excessive bandwidth or if it could bypass the firewall, and technology, which describes how the application runs on the client. Is it browser-based? Does it use a client-server architecture? In addition to this, you can apply a text-based smart filter. These persistent filters automatically update as new applications are added that match the selected criteria. Each rule can be configured to allow or deny the selected applications and can be scheduled to be active at specific times. Once configured, an application filter policy can be applied to a firewall in the same way as a web protection policy. The Live Connection page displays the IPv4 Live Connections report and allows you to view real-time statistics for the network traffic. You can use this report to check the current network load of different protocols, computer systems, in your LAN or on the internet, connections, or a combination of these. For example, network connections using a certain protocol. Synchronized app control is a breakthrough in network visibility. It can identify, classify, and control previously unknown applications active on the network, utilizing synchronized security to obtain information from the endpoint about applications that don't have signatures or are using generic HTTP or HTTPS connections. This solves a significant problem that affects signature-based app control on all firewalls today, where many applications are being classified as unknown, unclassified, generic HTTP or SSL, for example. Synchronized security includes synchronized application control is now also supported in Discover mode for providing enhanced visibility without enforcement. Note, synchronized application control is not supported in active-active high availability deployments. To support synchronized application control, computers must be managed by Sophos Central and have Security Heartbeat enabled. Security Heartbeat configuration on the XG firewall can now be found in the dedicated Synchronized Security menu item on the left. Here, you first need to enable Security Heartbeat by joining the XG firewall to Sophos Central. Then you can enable Synchronized Application Control. A new widget on the Control Center associated with the new Synchronized App Control feature provides an at-a-glance indication of unidentified applications that have been matched. Where possible, XG Firewall will automatically classify the application and control it using existing app control policies. Administrators can also manually assign categories to discovered applications to enable app control enforcement to block or prioritize the application as desired. Discovered applications can also be added directly to the existing app control policies. Complete the following tasks in Lab 6. Task 6.1, create custom web categories and user activities. Task 6.2, create a content filter. Task 6.3, create a custom web policy. Task 6.4, create a surfing quota for guest users. And Task 6.5, create an application filter policy. Prior to completing these tasks, you must have completed all steps up to the end of Lab 5, Task 5.4. On completion of this course, you should now be able to perform the actions shown here. Please take a moment to review these. If you are not confident that you have met these objectives, please review the material covered in this course. Click Continue when you are ready to proceed. Now that you have completed this module, you should complete Module 7, Email Protection.